Welcome in to the Saturday edition of the Fun Astrology Podcast, typically a space reserved for Ray Merriman and his weekly free newsletter, but they are doing a webinar tomorrow on Sunday, so we're going to use this space to talk about some of the things going on in the sky that we didn't talk about yesterday. Hi, everybody. Thomas Miller on the Fun Astrology Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in here. These are important times, obviously, and I recorded yesterday before the news came out of the Middle East, so we're going to catch up on some of that today, but really it was all packaged in there that when these things happen, for those of us that are watching the sky, it's like it doesn't tell us exactly how these things are going to manifest, but it shouldn't surprise us. The point I'm trying to drill home to all of us is that this is going to be there for 6 years. I mean, we can't even imagine. I think one of the things here is that we are in a marathon, and because of that, we have to train and perform as in a marathon, not in a sprint. So that includes the kind of nourishment that we get. You don't go do a marathon and not properly nourish with a balance of carbs and proteins, etc. Well, here, too, we need to feed our soul with that fuel that is going to propel us for the long haul. This is a lot more than just a good midweek meditation. So let's take a look at some of the things going on right now, this weekend, that we didn't get to yesterday. First of all, I have to ask a very rhetorical question. Are there any questions in the room about the moon wobble? Thank you. I didn't think so. The moon wobble peaked yesterday. That was when the sun and the nodes of the moon squared exactly. And the whole concept of this thing called the moon wobble that a lot of people don't follow is that things get wonky when the sun gets either conjunct or square the nodes of the moon. Well, this time it was square. But oh my, want to talk about the Middle East? How about the Hamas attack against the Israeli music concert that started all the Gaza stuff? That was during a moon wobble. The LA fires last year, moon wobble. And obviously Los Angeles today. And now what we don't know, let's just wait and let's watch things unfold and not predict what might go from here. But obviously conflict in the Middle East. And I think that's a good take through all of this that's going to happen. Let's be observers, not forecasters, not know-it-alls. Let's don't try to say this or that is going to happen when we don't know. Let's just observe, and let's hold our consciousness high. Now, on Saturdays, Ray typically goes back and reviews the week past before we take a look forward. So what else happened in addition to the culmination of the square between the sun and the nodes of the moon wobble? We had a full moon. There is a known trading pattern that markets typically commonly will fall during a full moon and rise or peak into a new moon. Well, that script played pretty well this week. On Monday, and Kristin had this in Lucky Stars. For those of you who are in that, you knew this in advance. Monday had Venus squaring Pluto. Well, that was on Friday. Venus squared Pluto. Then Mars squared Neptune Monday night. Also Monday, Mercury squared Saturn. That rolls us into what's ahead because this weekend is pivotal to this continuing energy. The big show happens on Sunday, but today the moon enters Aquarius to set the stage for this. That happens at 7 o'clock this morning Eastern. So with that, the tendency of revolutionary, shake it up, also my way or the highway, the moon now in Aquarius for the next couple of days. But the big show of the weekend is tomorrow. And it starts with Mars squaring Uranus. That's a big aspect. Mars, flamboyant and big in Leo, and Uranus about to hit 29 degrees Taurus. Uranus then moves into Gemini on July 7th. But let's not just glaze over that one so fast. What has happened in the past when Uranus hits 29 degrees and then about 3 weeks or so later changes signs? Let's just go back the last couple. Here, let's hit some highlights. I looked this up. So first of all, when Uranus entered Aquarius, which was 1995 to 96. Well, so here you have the ruling planet moving into the sign that it rules, and they both cover technology. That was the tech boom beginning. That was the 1995 was the beginning of everything that we know and use without even thinking about it today. Also, something I remember well, know where I was when it happened. The Oklahoma City bombing happened in 1995 on April 19th. I just was in Little Rock and we toured the Clinton Museum with a Clinton family member. That was interesting. And one of the things that came up there in 95, the Bosnian War ended in 95 with a peace agreement. But obviously, that 29-degree moving in was dominated by technology. Windows, also 95. Windows 95 from Microsoft came out in 95. All right, let's fast forward to Uranus moving into Pisces. Now we're 2003, 2004. Well, that kicked off social media. I didn't realize this, but WordPress, which I still use for the websites, started in 2003. Maybe it's time to upgrade that. We also had the big outbreak of SARS. There was a big earthquake in Iran in December 2003, a 6.6, killed over 25,000 people. The space shuttle Columbia blew up. And here we are again, the Iraqi War. The first one began in March of 2003. You remember the theme of that war was shock and awe. Let's bring it into Aries, and that happened in 2010 and 2011. That was the WikiLeaks period of 2010 when Julian Assange released all those classified documents that got him into trouble. The Arab Spring. There was a 9.0 earthquake and tsunami in Japan that killed over 15,000 people. Of course, that's what triggered the Fukushima nuclear disaster. And not to leave technology out of it, that was when Bitcoin started to get legs. It was launched in 2009. By 2010, there was some traction. Isn't that interesting? And again, we will see how we look back on this period at Uranus getting ready to move into Gemini. But already some headlines are being written. So that's the Mars square Uranus on Sunday. Then we have the first of these other aspects that will be taking place over the next few days. 10:35 Sunday morning Eastern, Jupiter squares Saturn. There is the Aries vortex in action. And that's the first in this domino trip because on Wednesday of next week, Jupiter will square Neptune. Remember, Saturn and Neptune. I'm going to start calling them Saturn. We have to do something to weld them together. So Jupiter hits Saturn Sunday and Wednesday. Then the Sun, remember, is moving out of Gemini toward Cancer. It moves in next Friday, the 20th. And then the Sun squares Saturn on the 22nd. It squares Neptune on the 23rd. And it conjoins Jupiter on the 24th. So that puts this emphasis between, obviously, 0 Cancer, with Jupiter and the Sun, over to 0 Aries, which we've been talking about, the Aries vortex. Now let's just theoretically move forward a month. The Sun now goes into Leo. Well, now we have a fire trine. But this is when things start to thin out, because as we move into August and even September, next the Sun moves into Virgo. Well, now we have a quincunx back to that 0 Aries point. And then it moves into Libra, and we are opposite. And that's when this chart starts to really spread itself out. Then we have a lot of wonky aspects all over the place. So that's a big overview of the planetary stuff. We talked about the Great Pyramid again in depth, the pieces that are the driving factor. We talked about that yesterday. How do you and I, who want to live our highest timeline and elevate our consciousness, what script should we be following into this and through it? And so much of this, I think, depends on you individually, because what might be right for me or make sense to me may not to you. I'm looking more to defensify right now. But if I were 40 years older, I might be leaning toward jumping into the chaos. You know, out of chaos comes tremendous opportunity. Houses might get cheaper. If you have time for several 10-year real estate cycles, you might look at accumulating some. But that's an individual decision. If you're more up on the timeline like I am, you might want to pull some chips off the table, shore up, lighten up, get rid of stuff. If you're younger, you might want to diversify. For example, what could you go back to school and get some kind of education of a monetizable skill? Maybe in therapy, counseling, combine it with astrology. I keep hearing of so many people going into end-of-life care now. That might be of interest. And again, this is if you have the years on your side, predictably. You might want to get a real estate license with that too. Learn to develop property. Maybe you want to accumulate hard metal assets, gold, silver, etc. That one always kind of escaped me. You have to figure out a place to store it. It doesn't give you a dividend. And go up to the gas station and try to buy a tank of gas with a gold bar. But anyway, a lot of ads say you should have it. But these are the things. You need to get with your soul on your path and figure out what the best course is. And if you're like a lot of us and you're just saying, I don't know yet, it hasn't come through the crystallization. Well, Neptune is sitting at 0 degrees or 1 or 2 degrees Aries right on top of Saturn. Of course, there's some fog in the system right now. If that's you, hold the space you have. I've been struggling with that one myself, but hold what space you have. Wait for the clarity. It will come. Keep asking, but not out of need, out of holding the space. I'm here, Lord, send me. And then stay open to the signs and stay pure. You know my message on that. Keep your line to the home office free and clear. All right, so we have some stuff ahead of us, and we're going to navigate it on our highest timeline. And I think that's a pretty good overview of what I would say if I were advising somebody. That's what you take a look at. Go inside first. Ask questions out there. Last or not at all. Because once you get that answer from inside, you don't need to discuss it with anybody. Just get busy doing it at that point. All right, I love you guys. Have a great rest of the weekend and try to turn some stuff off and get out in nature. That would be the best thing you could do. And I'll see you back on Monday. Thanks so much for your time and have a great rest of the day.